The diner was buzzing with laughter that night, but when the old man slid into my booth and lifted his hand, everything stopped. His wrinkled fingers carried a heavy gold ring, its crest shining under the neon lights. People around us chuckled when he leaned closer and said, "You look like my son." I wanted to dismiss him, but then his eyes hardened with a truth that pierced the room. He whispered, 5 words that froze every voice, every smirk, every breath inside Daryl's diner. In that instant, the weight of betrayal, the sting of my wife running off with my savings, and the shame of being laughed at in public collided into silence. And what followed next was the twist Marielle, my cheating wife, never saw coming. I still remember the exact moment my world fell apart. It was a Thursday morning, September 12th, the kind of autumn day in Willow Creek, Ohio, that tricks you with its beauty. The leaves were just beginning to turn, and the sunlight had that golden quality that makes everything look like it's been dipped in honey. I'd worked at Midwest Manufacturing for 23 years, not a job I loved, but one that put food on the table and kept our modest two-story house with the blue shutters from falling into disrepair. "Ethan, can you step into my office?" Mr. Henderson, the floor manager, caught me just as I was clocking in. I followed him, still wearing my jacket, thinking it was about the production quota, or maybe even that promotion I'd been hoping for. The way he avoided eye contact should have been my first clue. "I'm sorry to do this, Ethan. With the overseas contracts and the new automation system," he slid a white envelope across the desk. "Your severance package, 2 weeks' pay for every year. The company thanks you for your service." 23 years of loyalty reduced to a handshake and an envelope. I walked out of the building in a daze, carrying a cardboard box with my thermos, family photos, and the Employee of the Month plaque from 2018. By noon, I was sitting in our kitchen, staring at the wall, rehearsing how I'd tell Marielle. Marielle and I had been married for 19 years. She was beautiful in that small-town way, honey blonde hair always perfectly styled, blue eyes that crinkled when she laughed. When we met at the county fair in '05, she was the prettiest girl I'd ever seen, selling homemade jam at her family stand. I was 30 then, she was 26, and I couldn't believe my luck when she agreed to marry me a year later. Our kids, Nolan and Tessa, were teenagers now, 16 and 14. Good kids, though Nolan had been distant lately, and Tessa spent more time on her phone than talking to me. But that's normal for teenagers, right? At least, that's what I told myself. I decided to wait until after dinner to break the news. Made Marielle's favorite lasagna, set the table nice. The kids were at their after-school activities, so it would just be the two of us. A chance to make a plan together, like partners should. When the front door opened at 5:30, I straightened my shirt and tried to smile. "Ethan, why are you home?" Marielle looked different somehow, tense. Her eyes darted around the kitchen, landing everywhere but on me. "I made dinner, thought we could talk." She set her purse down carefully. "About what?" The words stuck in my throat. "I lost my job today. Henderson let me go. Automation and overseas contracts," he said. I expected concern, maybe anger or worry. What I didn't expect was the flash of calculation that crossed her face, quickly replaced by a practiced sympathy I'd never noticed before. "Oh, that's too bad." She didn't move to comfort me. "How much severance did you get?" The question caught me off guard. 2 weeks for every year. About 60,000 after taxes. She nodded, lips pressed together. "It's already in our account. Deposited this afternoon." Marielle sat down at the table, not touching the lasagna I'd made. "Ethan, we need to talk." That's when I knew. Something in her voice. Detached, resolved. This wasn't the first difficult conversation she'd planned to have today. "I've been thinking about this for a while," she continued, twisting her wedding band. "We've grown apart. You're always at the factory, and when you're home you're too tired to really be present. Marielle, if this is about the job, it's not just about the job, Ethan." Her voice hardened. "Though I have to say your timing is impressively bad." I felt like I was watching the scene from outside my body. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm done. I've given the best years of my life to this marriage, and what do I have to show for it? A husband who's just lost his job and a house that's falling apart. We can figure this out," I said, reaching for her hand. "We've been through tough times before." She pulled away. "No, Ethan, I've already figured it out. I'm leaving. Tonight. The kids are at my sister Diane's. They're staying with me." The room seemed to tilt. "You can't just take our children. Watch me. Marielle stood up. And Ethan? I took the money, all of it. The severance, our savings, everything. I stared at her, uncomprehending. You can't do that. That's our money, our future. It's my compensation for wasting 19 years with someone who was never going to be more than a factory worker. Her words cut deeper than any blade. You're worthless, Ethan. Always have been. I just finally worked up the courage to admit it. She was already moving toward the stairs. I packed last week. The kids have what they need at Diane's. I followed her, numb with shock. There's someone else, isn't there? Marielle paused on the stairs, and for a moment I saw something like guilt flash across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by cold resolve. His name is Richard. He owns 3 car dealerships in Cincinnati. He's everything you're not. Ambitious, exciting, successful. How long? My voice was barely audible. 8 months. No hesitation, no shame. He's been staying at the Willow Creek Inn whenever he's in town for business. The Willow Creek Inn was less than a mile from our house. How many times had I driven past it, oblivious to the fact that my wife was inside with another man? She emerged from our bedroom carrying a small suitcase. Diane will come by tomorrow to get the rest of my things. Please, Marielle, we can talk about this. 19 years, 2 kids, you can't just throw that away. She stopped at the front door, her hand on the knob. That's the thing, Ethan. There's nothing left to throw away. It's already gone. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. I stood in the hallway listening to her car start up and drive away. Our wedding photo hung on the wall. Beside me, Marielle in white, me in a rented tux, both of us grinning at the camera. I wondered if she'd been pretending even then. The house felt enormous suddenly, echoing with absence. I checked our joint account on my phone, my hands shaking. 0 balance. She'd taken everything, just like she said. 23 years of labor, of saving for retirement, for the kids' college, gone in a single, electronic transfer. I sat on the bottom stair and put my head in my hands. In the span of 12 hours, I'd lost my job, my wife, my children, and every penny I'd saved. The future I'd worked for had evaporated, leaving nothing but empty rooms and the smell of cooling lasagna. Later that night, unable to bear the silence of the house, I walked aimlessly through town. The autumn air had turned. Chilly, but I barely noticed. My feet carried me without direction until I found myself standing outside Daryl's Diner, its neon sign glowing in the darkness. Open 24 hours, it promised. I pushed through the door, seeking nothing more than warmth and noise to drown out the thoughts spinning in my head. I had no idea that inside those walls my broken life was about to take a turn I could never have imagined. Daryl's Diner had been a fixture in Willow Creek since the 1970s. Yellow vinyl booths, chrome-edged tables, and a black and white checkered floor that had seen better days. At nearly midnight on a Thursday, it was surprisingly busy, third-shift workers grabbing dinner before heading to the paper mill on the edge of town, college kids from the community college procrastinating over textbooks and bottomless cups of coffee. I slid into an empty booth near the back, away from the windows. The last thing I needed was for someone I knew to spot me and ask how Marielle and the kids were doing. Coffee? A waitress with faded red hair and a name tag that read Dottie appeared at my table, pot in hand. I nodded, though the last thing I needed was caffeine. I just wanted something to hold on to, something warm in a world that had suddenly turned ice cold. She poured the coffee, studied my face for a moment, then set a menu down. Kitchen's open all night. You look like you could use something solid. I managed a weak thanks, but didn't open the menu. Food was the furthest thing from my mind. I stared into the black coffee, seeing Marielle's face in its reflection. You're worthless, Ethan. The words echoed in my head, drowning out the clatter of silverware and murmured conversations around me. Mind if I join you, son? The voice broke through my thoughts, rough with age but clear and purposeful. I looked up to see an elderly man standing beside my booth. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, but stooped slightly with age. Had to be in his 80s at least, with a shock of white hair and deep lines etched into his face. He wore a dark blue cardigan over a plaid shirt, pressed khaki pants, and polished brown shoes, dressed with a care that spoke of old habits and dignity. Sure, I said, though I wanted nothing less than company. Something in his steady gaze made it impossible to refuse. He slid into the booth across from me, setting down a mug of tea. Appreciate. It name's Harlan Bennett. Ethan Cole, I replied automatically, not offering my hand. Harlan nodded, as if confirming something. "You look like my son." The statement hung in the air between us. I didn't know how to respond. Up close, I could see his eyes were a startling blue, sharp and lucid despite his age. There was something unsettling about the way he looked at me, like he could see straight through to the wreckage of my life. "I don't think I know your son," I finally said. "No, you wouldn't. Robert's been gone a long time now." Harlan sipped his tea. "But you have the same look about you. Something in the eyes." I shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Mr. Bennett." "Harlan, please." "Harlan, I'm not really in the mood for conversation tonight." He nodded, unperturbed. "Bad day?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "You could say that." "Wife leave you?" he asked with such casual certainty that I nearly spilled my coffee. "How did you—" "Like I said, something in the eyes." He set down his mug. "My Robert had the same look when his first wife took off with their boy. Like the ground's disappeared from under your feet, and you're still waiting to hit bottom." The accuracy of his description left me speechless. At the next table, a group of 20-somethings glanced over, clearly eavesdropping. One of them, a young woman with purple hair, whispered something to her friend, and they both giggled, looking at Harlan with the dismissive amusement young people often reserve for the elderly. Harlan either didn't notice or didn't care. He was focused entirely on me, his weathered hands wrapped around his mug. "She take the kids." I nodded, unable to speak around the sudden lump in my throat. "Money, too, I'd wager." Another nod. The diner seemed to fade around us, the sounds of clinking dishes and conversation receding. "My boy, Robert, he made a choice after his wife left," Harlan continued. "Bad choice. The kind you can't take back." He paused, his gaze distant. "Thought the best thing for his boy was to disappear. Couldn't face the shame," he said. "Couldn't bear to be a weekend dad watching another man raise his son." The group at the next table was openly watching now, not bothering to hide their interest. One of the young men smirked, nudging his friend. "With all due respect," I said quietly, "I don't see what this has to do with me." Harlan held up his left hand. On his ring finger was a heavy gold ring, the kind you don't see much anymore. Its face bore an intricate crest, a shield with what looked like a tree and 3 stars above it. The gold caught the diner's fluorescent light, winking like a signal. "Family ring," he said. 5 generations of Bennett men should have gone to Robert, then his boy after him." Someone at the next table snickered. "Looks like the old dude escaped from a nursing home," one of them stage whispered. Another added, "Or maybe it's his sugar daddy," setting off a round of barely suppressed laughter. Heat crept up my neck. Great. Public humiliation was just what I needed to cap off the worst day of my life. "Forget them," Harlan said, his voice suddenly hard and clear. He reached across the table and gripped my wrist with surprising strength. "Listen to me, son, I've got something important to say." The laughter from the next table grew louder. Dottie the waitress glanced over with a frown, but didn't intervene. "Look, I should go—" I started to slide out of the booth. Harlan's grip tightened. "Don't abandon them like me." 5 words. Just 5 simple words. But they hit me with such force that I fell back into my seat, the air leaving my lungs as if I'd been punched. The diner went oddly quiet, or maybe it was just that I couldn't hear anything beyond the roaring in my ears. "What did you say?" My voice was barely a whisper. Harlan's blue eyes bored into mine. "Don't abandon them like me, your children. Don't make my mistake." I glanced around the diner. The group at the next table had fallen silent, their smirks fading. Even Dottie had paused in her rounds, coffee pot suspended in mid-air, watching us. "You don't understand," I said, my voice cracking. "She took everything. I have nothing left to give them." Harlan released my wrist and leaned back. "You think it's about money? Things?" He shook his head slowly. "My Robert thought that too. Couldn't provide, so why stick around? Know where that got him. Dead at 43. Liver gave out. Never saw his boy grow up. Never made it right." "I'm sorry about your son," I managed. "Not looking for sorry," Harlan replied. "Looking to make sure history doesn't repeat itself right in front of me." The diner had gone strangely still around us. Even the cooks behind the counter seemed to be moving in slow motion, as if the entire place was holding its breath. What am I supposed to do? The question burst out of me, raw and desperate. "She's taken the kids to her sister's, emptied our accounts. I lost my job today. I can't even pay next month's mortgage." Harlan's expression softened slightly. "Start by showing up. Everything else comes after that. Just show up for those kids, even when it hurts." especially when it hurts. She won't let me near them. You don't know, Marielle. I know enough. Harlan tapped his ring against the table. I know that children need their father, even when their mother says otherwise. I know that money comes and goes, but time, his voice caught slightly, time only goes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, he extracted a faded photograph and laid it on the table between us. A young man in an army uniform, his face a younger version of Harlan's, stood proudly at attention. My Robert, 1975. Vietnam was over, but he enlisted anyway. Proud as hell of him that day. Harlan's finger traced the outline of his son's face. Never told him, though. Thought he knew. I stared at the photograph, then at Harlan, something shifting inside me. The despair that had been crushing me all day began to crack, just slightly, allowing a different emotion to seep through. Not hope, exactly. Something harder, more durable. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Why me? Harlan carefully returned the photograph to his wallet. Told you. You look like my son. He stood up slowly, his joints clearly stiff. But you don't have to make his mistakes or mine. He placed a $5 bill on the table for his tea. Best be getting home now. Getting late for an old man. As he turned to leave, he paused, placing his hand on my shoulder. Remember what I said, Ethan Cole. Don't abandon them, no matter what. Then he was gone, the diner door swinging shut behind him. The buzz of conversation gradually returned, but the mood had shifted. The group at the next table avoided my eyes, their earlier mockery replaced by an uncomfortable silence. Dottie appeared beside me, refilling my untouched coffee. Known Harlan for years, she said quietly. Never heard him talk so much to a stranger. Must see something in you. I looked down at the table where his ring had rested, a faint circle visible in the condensation from his mug. Don't abandon them like me. For the first time since Henderson had handed me that white envelope, since Marielle had walked out the door with our life savings, I felt something stirring inside me, a small, defiant flame, where before there had been only ashes. I didn't know how I was going to fix this mess. I didn't know if I could ever rebuild what had been destroyed today. But I suddenly knew, with absolute certainty, that I would not disappear from my children's lives. I would not become another Harlan Bennett, haunting diners with photographs and regrets. I would show up. Everything else would come after that. I sat in Daryl's diner long after Harlan left, nursing the same cold cup of coffee, until the night crowd thinned and the morning regulars began to arrive. Dottie gave me concerned glances, but kept the coffee coming without asking questions. By the time sunlight crept through the windows, painting the checkered floor in squares of gold, I had made my decision. The first step was getting to my feet, which felt like pushing through concrete. My body ached from sitting all night, but something else ached deeper, a wound that wouldn't heal with a hot shower and a change of clothes. Still, I left a generous tip for Dottie and stepped out into the morning light. Willow Creek was stirring to life. Shopkeepers flipping closed signs to open, school buses collecting children at corners, people hurrying toward another day of certainty I no longer possessed. The walk home was barely a mile, but each step felt deliberate, like I was choosing my path for the first time. Our house, my house now, I supposed, looked different in the morning light. Smaller somehow, less permanent. I showered, changed, and opened my laptop. First order of business, checking the damage to our accounts. Marielle had been thorough. Checking account, 0. Savings, 0. Joint credit card, maxed out with a cash advance. She'd even emptied the Christmas fund we kept in a separate account for the kids' presents. 23 years of careful saving, gone in a series of transfers dated yesterday morning, hours before I'd lost my job. The timing wasn't coincidence. She'd been planning this. My hands shook as I closed the laptop. The urge to collapse was overwhelming, but Harlan's words echoed in my mind. Don't abandon them like me. I took a deep breath and picked up my phone. Diane answered on the second ring. What do you want, Ethan? No hello, no sympathy, just coldness. Diane had never liked me, always thought her sister could do better. Guess she'd been right about that. I want to see my kids, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Marielle said you'd call. She said I shouldn't let you talk to them. They're my children, Diane. They're upset, Ethan. Finding out their parents are separating, moving out of their home. They need stability right now, not more drama. I gripped the phone tighter. What did Marielle tell them? A pause. That's between her and the kids. What did she tell them, Diane? I repeated, an edge creeping into my voice. She sighed. That you lost your job and couldn't handle the responsibility anymore. That you two agreed they'd be better off with her for a while. The lie hit me like a physical blow. That's not what happened, and you know it. Do I? Her voice dripped with disdain. All I know is my sister showed up at my door in tears with two confused teenagers. You want to dispute her version? Take it up with a lawyer. I don't want a legal battle. I just want to see my kids. They're at school now anyway. I'll ask them if they want to see you when they get back. It wasn't much, but it was something. Thank you, Diane. Don't thank me. I'm doing this for them, not you. She hung up. The rest of the day passed in a blur of practicalities. Called the bank to dispute the transfers. Too late, they said, since Marielle was a joint account holder. Called the mortgage company to explain my situation. They offered a 1-month forbearance while I sorted things out. Called Henderson at Midwest Manufacturing to ask about unemployment benefits. He couldn't have sounded less interested if he tried. By late afternoon, I'd made exactly 0 progress toward fixing my life, but I'd kept moving, kept breathing, kept putting one foot in front of the other, and at 4:15 my phone rang. Dad. Nolan's voice was uncertain, like he was talking to a stranger. Hey, buddy? The sound of his voice brought tears to my eyes. Mom said you weren't coming back. The words stabbed through me. That's not true, Nolan. I'm right here. I'm still your dad. But you lost your job and you guys are getting divorced. Slow down, I interrupted, trying to keep my voice calm. Yes, I lost my job. And your mom decided to leave. But that has nothing to do with you and Tessa. I'm still your father. I still love you both more than anything. Silence on the line. Then, so quiet I almost missed it. Can we see you? Of course you can. When? Where? Aunt Diane said we could meet you at the park by her house. After dinner, maybe. I'll be there, I promised. 5:30? Okay. Another pause. Tessa wants to talk to you. There was fumbling on the line, then my daughter's voice, smaller and more fragile than I'd ever heard it. Daddy? My heart squeezed. Tessa hadn't called me Daddy in years. Hey, sweetheart. Are you really coming to see us? Wild horses couldn't keep me away. Mom said you needed some time alone, that you were sad about your job. I closed my eyes, fighting for control. I am sad about my job, but I'm never too sad to see you and your brother. Never. Promise? I promise, Tess. I'll see you at the park at 5:30, okay? Okay. Love you. Love you too, sweetheart. I hung up and looked around the empty house. For the first time since yesterday morning, I felt a flicker of purpose. The kids needed to see me, needed to know I hadn't abandoned them. Everything else, the job, the money, even Marielle could wait. The park near Diane's house was small but well-maintained, with a playground, a few picnic tables, and a grassy area where local teams sometimes practice soccer. I arrived 20 minutes early, too anxious to sit still at home. I paced the perimeter, rehearsing what to say, how to reassure them without bad-mouthing their mother. At 5:35, they appeared at the park entrance. Nolan, lanky and serious in his school clothes, and Tessa, her blonde hair so like her mother's, pulled back in a ponytail. They scanned the park, and when Tessa spotted me, she broke into a run. Dad! She crashed into me, arms wrapping around my waist. I hugged her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. Nolan approached more cautiously, hands in his pockets. He'd grown so much in the past year, nearly my height now. His eyes, my eyes dark brown and cautious, assessed me carefully. Hey, Dad, he said, maintaining his distance. Hey, Nolan. I released Tessa with one arm and extended it toward him, not pushing, just offering. After a moment's hesitation, he stepped forward and let me pull him into a half-hug. I knew you'd come, Tessa said, looking up at me with absolute faith. Of course I came. I led them to a nearby bench. Listen, both of you. I know things are confusing right now. Mom and we're going through some adult problems, but none of that changes how much I love you. Are you getting divorced? Nolan asked bluntly. I hesitated, then nodded. Probably, yes. Because you lost your job? No, buddy. That happened on the same day, but it's not why Mom left. Tessa frowned. Then why? How do you explain to your children that their mother stole your life savings and ran off with another man? That she called you worthless to your face? Sometimes people grow apart, I said carefully. Your mom decided she wanted a different life. With Richard? Nolan's voice was cold. I stared at him, stunned. You know about Richard? He scoffed. Mom's not as sneaky as she thinks. I saw texts on her phone months ago. Nolan, it's fine, Dad. I'm not a kid. But the hurt in his eyes said otherwise. Who's Richard? Tessa asked, confused. Nobody important, I said quickly, shooting Nolan a look. The point is, whatever happens between me and your mom, nothing changes between us. I'm still your dad. I'm still going to be here for you, for everything. But we're staying with Aunt Diane, Tessa pointed out. For now, yes, but we'll figure something out. I promise. I squeezed her hand. What's important is that we keep talking, keep seeing each other. Are you coming back to the house? Nolan asked. I'm still there. It's your home too, whenever you want to come back. Mom said we had to sell it, that we couldn't afford it anymore. Another blow. Marielle was already planning to sell our home. That's something we'll have to work out. But don't worry about adult problems, okay? Let me handle that part. We spent the next hour talking, really talking, in a way we hadn't in too long. Nolan told me about the computer science class he was acing, Tessa about her latest art project. They asked careful questions about my job, and I answered honestly without burdening them with my fears. When Diane texted that it was time to come home, I walked them to the edge of the park. Can we see you tomorrow? Tessa asked. If it's okay with Aunt Diane. Absolutely. She'll say yes, Nolan said with sudden determination. I'll make sure of it. I hugged them both one more time, holding on perhaps a little. Too long. I love you both, never forget that. Love you too, Dad, they echoed. Tessa immediately, Nolan a beat later, but just as sincere. As I watched them walk away, Harlan's words echoed in my mind. Start by showing up. Today I'd shown up. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm of sorts. Each day I'd search for jobs, make calls about our financial situation, and meet the kids at the park or a fast food restaurant wherever Diane would allow. Marielle remained conspicuously absent, supposedly settling things with Richard in Cincinnati, leaving her sister to mediate our fragmented family life. Finding work in Willow Creek wasn't easy. The town had been built around industries that were either dying or moving overseas. My experience at Midwest Manufacturing meant little to the handful of places still hiring. I applied for unemployment benefits, picked up odd jobs fixing cars and helping neighbors with home repairs, anything to generate some income. The severance money was gone for good. My lawyer, a sympathetic but realistic man named Dave Kaplan, explained that since Marielle had been a joint account holder, legally she'd had every right to withdraw the funds. The best we could do was factor it into the eventual divorce settlement, which could be months away. And the house? I asked him during our second meeting. Dave sighed, shuffling papers on his cluttered desk. You can fight to keep it, but without steady income the court will likely order it sold and the proceeds divided. So I lose my job, my wife, my savings and my home. I'm sorry, Ethan. Divorce is rarely fair. He peered at me over reading glasses. For what it's worth, your case for joint custody is strong. No history of abuse, long-term involvement in your children's lives. That's something. Something, but not enough. Each night I returned to an empty house that would soon no longer be mine, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life from scratch at 48. On the 15th day after Marielle left, I was replacing Mrs. Lowell's garbage disposal when my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Cole? A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. Yes? This is Principal Warner from Willow Creek High. There's been an incident with Nolan. We need you to come in right away. My heart dropped. Is he hurt? No, but he's in serious trouble. How soon can you get here? I apologized to Mrs. Lowell, packed up my tools and drove straight to the high school, a sprawling brick building where both Marielle and I had been students decades earlier. Principal Warner's office hadn't changed much since then. Same institutional furniture, same framed diplomas on the wall. Nolan sat in a chair facing her desk, eyes fixed on the floor. His right knuckles were raw and red. Mr. Cole, thank you for coming. Principal Warner gestured to a chair next to Nolan. She was in her 50s, with steel-gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. I've been trying to reach your wife, but she hasn't returned my calls. She's out of town, I said, sitting down. What happened? She folded her hands on her desk. Nolan punched another student, twice, in the cafeteria, in front of dozens of witnesses. I glanced at my son, who still wouldn't look at me. That doesn't sound like Nolan. I agree. He's never been in trouble before. Which is the only reason we're not discussing immediate suspension. She turned to Nolan. Would you like to explain to your father what provoked this behavior? Nolan remained silent, his jaw clenched tight. Nolan, I placed my hand on his shoulder. Talk to me, buddy. Brandon Sullivan deserved it, he finally muttered. Violence is never the answer, Principal Warner said automatically. What did Brandon do? I pressed. Nolan's eyes flashed up, suddenly full of fury. He said Mom ran off with Mr. Mercedes because you couldn't satisfy her. He said everyone in town knows she emptied your bank accounts because you're a pathetic loser who got fired. His voice broke. He said it in front of everyone. The office went very still. Principal Warner's professional mask slipped, revealing a flicker of genuine sympathy. I see, she said quietly. Is that what people are saying? I asked, my throat tight. Around town? Nolan nodded miserably. Brandon's mom works at the bank. He said she told his dad all about it. Small towns. No secrets, only delayed revelations. Principal Warner cleared her throat. Regardless of the provocation, physical violence is against school policy. However, given the circumstances and Nolan's clean record, I'm assigning 2 days of detention rather than suspension. Thank you, I said, grateful for the mercy. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't. She stood. Bah, you're both free to go. Nolan, detention starts tomorrow after school. Outside in the parking lot, Nolan walked ahead of me, his shoulders hunched defensively. I'm not sorry, he said as we reached my truck. I didn't ask you to be. He looked up, surprised. You're not mad? I opened the passenger door for him. Get in. Once we were both inside, I turned to face him. What Brandon said was cruel and untrue, but fighting doesn't fix anything, Nolan. It just adds more problems. So I should have just stood there while he trashed our family, while he called you a loser? Tears welled in his eyes. You're not a loser, Dad. I pulled him into a hug, and this time he didn't hesitate to return it. I know it hurts, I said softly. The things people are saying. What's happening with Mom, all of it, but we have to be better than this. It's not fair. His voice was muffled against my shoulder. No, it's not. I released him and started the truck. How about we pick up your sister and go get some ice cream? I think we both need it today. He managed a weak smile. Okay. Diane was surprisingly cooperative when I called and asked to take both kids for the evening. Maybe Principal Warner had reached her after all. Within the hour I was sitting in Willow Creek Creamery with both my children, watching Tessa attack a massive sundae while Nolan picked at his milkshake. So, everyone at school knows? Tessa asked, frowning. Nolan nodded grimly. Pretty much. That's why Zoe Hughes asked if I was living at Aunt Diane's because Mom ran away with a rich guy. She set down her spoon. I didn't know what she was talking about. I'm sorry you're both dealing with this, I said. People talk, especially in small towns. But the truth is between us. What is the truth, Dad? Nolan asked. You never really told us what happened. I hesitated. How much should I share? They deserved honesty, but they also deserved to preserve some respect for their mother. The truth is your mom decided she wanted a different life, I said carefully. She met someone else and decided to leave. The timing with my job was coincidental, though unfortunate. And the money, Nolan pressed. Did she really take everything? I looked into my son's eyes and saw not a child, but a young man demanding respect. Yes, she transferred our savings before telling me she was leaving. Tessa gasped. That's stealing. Legally, no, since both our names were on the accounts. Morally, I trailed off, unwilling to complete the thought. So we're broke? Tessa asked, eyes wide. We're adjusting, I corrected. I'm looking for a new job. We have the house for now. We'll figure it out. Can we come home? Nolan asked suddenly. I hate staying at Aunt Diane's. She talks about you like you're the villain. And she keeps saying Mum will be back soon, but it's been 2 weeks, Tessa added. I miss my room. I miss our house. Hope flickered in my chest, but I tempered it with realism. It's not that simple. Your mom has temporary custody. That's not fair. Tessa's voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. We should get to choose. Tessa, lower your voice, I said gently. We'll work it out, I promise. For now, let's just enjoy our ice cream, okay? But the seed had been planted. As I drove them back to Diane's that evening, I could see the wheels turning in both their minds. They wanted to come home, to their rooms, their routines, to me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of the man I used to be, the father they needed. Harlan's voice echoed in my mind. Just show up for those kids, even when it hurts. especially when it hurts. I was showing up, and somehow against all odds it seemed to be making a difference. 3 days later, I was fixing a leaky pipe under the Henderson sink. Ironic, given that Mr. Henderson had been the one to fire me, when my phone buzzed. Diane's name flashed on the screen. My stomach tightened. She never called, unless... Something was wrong. "Ethan, you need to come over now." Her voice was strained. "What's happened? Are the kids okay?" "They're fine, but..." She lowered her voice. "Marielle's back. She's taking them to Cincinnati tonight." I nearly hit my head on the pipe. "Tonight, without telling me?" "Just get over here. They're packing now." I apologized to Mrs. Henderson, hastily gathered my tools, and drove to Diane's 2-story Victorian on Maple Street. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Cincinnati was over 2 hours away. If Marielle took the kids there, seeing them regularly would be nearly impossible. Diane's driveway was occupied by a sleek black Mercedes I didn't recognize. Richard's car, I presumed. The thought of him sitting in Diane's living room, inserting himself into my children's lives, made my blood boil. I took a deep breath before knocking. "Stay calm. For the kids." Diane opened the door, her expression a mix of discomfort and relief. "They're upstairs," she whispered. "Marielle and Richard are in the kitchen." I nodded my thanks and headed up the familiar staircase. Nolan's temporary room was first on the right, the door slightly ajar. Inside, he was shoving clothes into his duffel bag, movements jerky with anger. "Nolan?" His head snapped up. "Dad!" He crossed the room in 2 strides and lowered his voice. "Mom's making us move to Cincinnati. Tonight." "I know. Diane called me." I placed my hands on his shoulders. "What happened?" "She just showed up with her boyfriend." His face twisted on the word. "Said she's found a great place for us, that we'll love the new school, that Richard has connections that can help me get into college." He kicked the bed frame. "I don't want to go. Let me talk to your mom. Good luck. She's acting like this is some amazing opportunity we should be grateful for." He looked at me directly, his eyes, my eyes, steady and determined. "I'm not going, Dad." Before I could respond, Tessa appeared in the doorway, her face tear-streaked. "Daddy!" She rushed into my arms. "Don't let Mum take us away." I held her tight, feeling her tears soak through my shirt. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart, I promise." "No, it's not." She won't listen. She says we have to go tonight because Richard has meetings tomorrow and needs to get back. My jaw tightened. Richard's schedule was dictating my children's lives now. "Where's your mom?" "Kitchen," they both said in unison. I kissed Tessa's forehead. "Stay up here for a few minutes, okay? Let me talk to her." Downstairs, I followed the sound of voices to Diane's kitchen. Marielle sat at the table, a glass of wine in her hand, laughing at something the man beside her had said. Richard, I presumed. Tall, tanned, expensive watch, glinting on his wrist. They looked up when I entered, Marielle's laugh cutting off abruptly. "Ethan." Her voice was cool, controlled. "Diane shouldn't have called you. She shouldn't have needed to." I kept my voice level. "You were going to take our children to Cincinnati without even telling me." Richard cleared his throat and stood, extending his hand. "Richard Davenport. I've heard a lot about you." I ignored his hand, keeping my focus on Marielle. "We need to talk privately. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Richard." She took a deliberate sip of wine. "Fine." I sat down across from her. "You can't just uproot the kids without discussion. They have friends here, school routines. They'll make new friends. The schools in Cincinnati are better anyway." She waved a dismissive hand. "Besides, there's nothing left for them here. The house will have to be sold. You have no job." "I'm their father. I'm here," Richard interjected. "Marielle has told me what a dedicated father you are. We're not trying to come between you and your children. You can visit any time." "Visit?" I stared at him incredulously. "They're my children, not a vacation destination." "Ethan, be reasonable," Marielle sighed. "Cincinnati offers them opportunities Willow Creek never could. Richard's condo is in the best school district. Nolan could intern at Richard's dealership next summer. Tessa could take art classes at the conservatory. They don't want to go," she rolled her eyes. "They're children. They don't know what's best for them." "Have you even asked what they want?" Of course, they're just confused right now, emotional. Once they're settled in Cincinnati, they'll see this was for the best." I leaned forward. "Marielle, listen to me. Taking them tonight, against their will, is wrong. At least give them time to process this. Give us all time to discuss arrangements properly." There's nothing to discuss, she snapped, her composure slipping. I have temporary custody. The decision is made. Actually, came a voice from the doorway, that's not entirely true. We all turned to see Nolan and Tessa standing there, shoulder to shoulder, faces set with determination I'd never seen before. Nolan, Tessa, go back upstairs, Marielle ordered. The adults are talking. No. Nolan stepped forward, Tessa right beside him. We're not going to Cincinnati. Marielle's eyes widened. Excuse me. We want to stay with Dad. Tessa's voice was small but firm. In Willow Creek. In our house. This isn't a democracy, Marielle said, her voice hardening. I'm your mother, and I've made the best decision for our family. What family? Nolan shot back. You left us, you took Dad's money, you moved in with him. He gestured toward Richard, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. That's enough. Marielle stood up, wine sloshing in her glass. Go upstairs and finish packing. Now. No. Nolan didn't budge. We're 16 and 14. In Ohio, that means the court will consider our preferences. I looked it up. I stared at my son, stunned. When had he researched custody laws? You can force us to go tonight, he continued, but we'll just keep telling everyone, the school counselor, the judge, whoever will listen, that we want to live with Dad. Nolan James Cole, you do not speak to me that way. Marielle's voice shook with rage. Mom, please, Tessa said, softer than her brother, but no less determined. We love you, but we want to stay in Willow Creek with Dad. Richard cleared his throat again. Marielle, perhaps we should stay out of this, she snapped at him before turning back to the kids. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me. By choosing him? We're not choosing anyone, Nolan said. We're choosing our home, our school, our friends. The kitchen fell silent. Marielle looked from the kids to me, her face flushing. You put them up to this. I shook my head. I had no idea. Right. Her voice dripped with sarcasm. Always the innocent victim. Mom, Tessa pleaded, can't we just stay here? You can visit from Cincinnati, or we can visit you on weekends sometimes. Marielle stared at her daughter, something shifting in her expression. For a moment I glimpsed the woman I'd married, the one who could listen, who could put our children first. Then her gaze hardened again. Fine. Stay with your father. See how well he provides for you without a job, without savings. She grabbed her purse from the counter. Richard, let's go. Marielle, he began, looking uncertain. Now, Richard. She stormed out of the kitchen. Richard hesitated, then nodded awkwardly at me and the kids before following her. Moments later, the front door slammed, and the Mercedes engine roared to life. The four of us, me, Nolan, Tessa, and Diane, stood frozen in the kitchen, the echo of Marielle's anger still hanging in the air. Diane broke the silence first. Well, that went about as well as could be expected. Tessa turned to me, eyes swimming with tears. Can we really stay with you, Dad? I looked at my children, these incredible, brave, loyal people who just stood up for what they wanted, who'd chosen to stay when it would have been easier to go. Yes, I said, pulling them both into a hug. We'll figure it out together. Are you mad at us? Nolan asked, his voice muffled against my shoulder. Mad? Nobody, I'm proud. So proud of both of you. Over their heads I caught Diane's eye. She gave me a small, grudging nod, not quite approval, but acknowledgement. She'd stand by her sister, but she wouldn't stand in our way. That night I brought my children home. Their rooms were just as they'd left them 2 weeks earlier, beds unmade, posters on the walls, school books stacked on desks. As they settled in, I sat at the kitchen table, making lists, calculating figures, planning our next steps. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time since that Thursday morning. In Henderson's office, it held possibility. When Harlan had told me to show up for my kids, I don't think even he could have imagined they'd show up for me too. Word travels fast in small towns, but I wasn't prepared for how quickly the news spread about Marielle's return and dramatic departure, leaving the kids behind. By noon the next day, my phone was buzzing constantly, some calls from well-meaning friends checking on us, others from nosy acquaintances fishing for gossip. I ignored most of them, focusing instead on getting the kids settled back into their routine. Driving them to school that morning felt like a victory, small but significant. Nolan sat in the passenger seat scrolling through his phone, while Tessa chattered nervously from the back about what she'd tell her. Friends. Just tell the truth, Nolan said, not looking up. Mom left with Richard. We're staying with Dad. End of story. It's not that simple, Tessa protested. People are going to ask questions. So, let them ask. He finally glanced back at his sister. We didn't do anything wrong. I caught his eye and gave him a grateful smile. When had my son become so mature, so assured? At the school. Drop off, I squeezed Tessa's hand. Remember, you don't owe anyone explanations. If it gets overwhelming, go to the counselor's office. I already spoke with Mrs. Patel. She nodded, took a deep breath, and joined the stream of students heading inside. Nolan lingered by the truck. You good, buddy? I asked. Yeah. He hesitated. Just, thanks, Dad, for letting us stay. You never have to thank. And me for that, ever. He nodded and walked away, shoulders straight, head high. I watched him until he disappeared inside, marveling at his resilience. The next challenge was work. With the kids back home, the urgency of finding stable employment had doubled. I spent the morning making calls, following up on applications and taking on 2 more repair jobs for the weekend. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Around lunchtime, my phone rang again. Unknown number. Ethan Cole, I answered, expecting another odd job offer. Mr. Cole, this is Shelley Gardner from Gardner's Auto. My father mentioned you might be looking for work. Gardner's Auto was the largest repair shop in Willow Creek, a family business that had been around for decades. I'd applied there the week before but hadn't heard back. Yes, I am, I confirmed, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. Dad was impressed with your resume. 23 years at Midwest is nothing to sneeze at. Plus, we heard you've been doing some repair work around town. Small towns. Everyone knew everything. Just trying to make ends meet, I said. Well, our lead mechanic is retiring next month. We need someone experienced to step. In pays competitive, full benefits, interested? My heart skipped. Absolutely. Come by tomorrow, 9 a.m. We'll talk details. After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table, stunned. It wasn't the same as my job at Midwest, but it was stable work with benefits. It was hope. The next surprise came that afternoon when I stopped by Dave Kaplan's office to update him on the custody situation. His secretary showed me straight in, where Dave was sorting through a stack of papers. Ethan, good timing, just got off the phone with Marielle's lawyer. He gestured to the chair across from him. Seems your wife is willing to negotiate. I sat down cautiously. Negotiate what? Everything. The house, custody, financial settlement. He leaned back, studying me. Something changed. Yesterday she was insisting on full custody and selling the house. Today she's open to the kids staying with you and keeping the property. I explained what had happened at Diane's. Dave whistled. Those are some impressive kids you've got. They are, I agreed, chest swelling with pride. Here's where we stand now. Marielle's offering joint legal custody, primary physical custody to you, with generous visitation. Rights for her. She'll sign off on keeping the house, assuming you can make the payments. In exchange, she wants the car, her personal possessions, and... He hesitated. No claim on the money she transferred. I barked out a laugh. So she keeps the money she stole and I keep the house I can barely afford? Essentially, yes. Dave adjusted his glasses. It's not ideal, but considering what she was demanding before, it's a win, Ethan. And if I fight for the money? Then we're looking at a drawn-out legal battle that will cost more than you'd recover. Plus, she could change her mind about the kids. I rubbed my temples, a headache forming. Some choice. Look at it this way. You keep what matters most. Your children. Your home. And she gets away with theft. Dave's expression softened. Sometimes winning isn't about getting everything. It's about walking away with what you can't live without. Harlan's voice echoed in my mind. Money comes and goes, but time only goes. I'll think about it, I promised. On the drive home, I wrestled with the decision. The practical choice was clear. Take the deal, keep the house and the kids, move forward. But something in me rebelled against letting Marielle profit from her betrayal. I was still mulling it over when I pulled into my driveway. A familiar figure sat on my front steps, Dottie from Daryl's diner. She stood as I approached, smoothing her waitress uniform. Dottie, everything okay? Sorry to show up unannounced. She seemed nervous. Got something I thought you should know. I invited her inside, offered coffee, which she declined. At the kitchen table, she pulled a small notebook from her purse. Been working at Daryl's 30 years now. You see a lot, hear more. She tapped the notebook. I keep track of regulars. Helps me remember their orders, their stories. Okay. I wasn't sure where this was going. That night the old man sat with you? Harlan Bennett? She opened the notebook to a marked page. Been bothering me ever since. The name was familiar. I leaned forward. What about him? There was a Harlan Bennett who used to come in years back. Every Tuesday. Same booth. Black coffee, wheat toast. Army veteran. Lost his son, Robert, to liver failure in the 90s. She slid the notebook toward me. There on the yellowed page was the name Harlan Bennett, with notes about his order and bits of conversation she'd recorded. Dottie, lots of people lose family members. Could be a coincidence. She shook her head. That's just it. The Harlan Bennett I knew died 6 years ago, heart attack, right at his regular table. I called the ambulance myself. A chill ran down my spine. That's not possible. I spoke to him 2 weeks ago. He was real, solid. He had a photograph, a ring. I'm not saying... You didn't meet someone, she interrupted. Just that it couldn't have been the Harlan Bennett I knew. Then who was he? Dottie shrugged. Don't know. But when I heard your kids were back home, that you were fighting to put your life back together, well, it seemed important somehow, like maybe you should know. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table, turning her revelation over in my mind. It didn't make sense. The man in the diner had been flesh and blood. We'd talked, others had seen him, hadn't they? I tried to recall if anyone besides me had directly interacted with Harlan. Dottie had refilled his tea, but had she spoken to him? The group at the next table had laughed at us, but had they acknowledged him specifically? Dad? Nolan's voice startled me. He stood in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. The word choice made me laugh nervously. I'm fine. How was school? Better than yesterday. People are still talking, but... He shrugged. It doesn't matter as much now. Good. I hesitated, then asked, Nolan, do you believe in, I don't know, messages from beyond? Signs? He gave me a strange look. Like ghosts. And stuff? Not really. Why? Just thinking about something someone told me. I shook off the unsettling thoughts. Hey, I might have a job lined up. At Gardner's Auto. Seriously? That's awesome, Dad. His face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. Nothing certain yet, but it's promising. I stood up, decision suddenly clear. Listen, I need to make a call. Can you start your homework? I'll help with dinner when Tessa gets home from art club. Sure. He started toward the stairs, then turned back. Dad, whatever you decide about Mom and the money and everything, we're with you, me and Tessa. A lump formed in my throat. Thanks, buddy. Once he was upstairs, I called Dave Kaplan. I'll take the deal, I said without preamble. The kids and the house. She can keep the money. You sure? Dave sounded surprised. We could push for a better arrangement. I'm sure, draft the papers. After hanging up, I went to the cupboard where I kept important documents. In the back was a small box containing things I'd saved from my parents' house after they passed. Dad's watch, Mom's locket, old photographs. Among them was a silver frame holding a picture of my parents on their 30th anniversary. I'd always been struck by the contentment in their expressions, the quiet dignity of a life well lived, despite modest means. They'd taught me that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in love, in integrity, in showing up when it mattered. In that moment, I understood that some losses were really victories in disguise. Marielle had taken my money, but left me with everything that truly mattered. My children, my self-respect, my capacity to begin again. Don't abandon them like me. Whether Harlan Bennett had been real or something else entirely, his message had been true. And I had listened. 3 months passed in a blur of adjustments. The job at Gardner's Auto proved to be a blessing beyond the paycheck. I'd always been handy with engines, a hobby that had taken a back seat during my years at Midwest. But at Gardner's I rediscovered the satisfaction of working with my hands, of fixing what was broken, of making something run smoothly again. You've got a gift, Cole, Old Man Gardner told me after I diagnosed a particularly tricky transmission problem that had stumped their other mechanics. Should have hired you years ago. The pay wasn't what I'd made at Midwest, but it was enough to keep up with the mortgage and bills. More importantly, the flexible schedule allowed me to be there for Nolan and Tessa, attending Nolan's computer science competitions and Tessa's art exhibitions, helping with homework, cooking dinner most nights. The divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising smoothness. True to her word, Marielle didn't contest our new arrangement. The official papers, giving me primary physical custody, arrived on a Tuesday, along with the document releasing any claim to the disputed funds. as the lawyers diplomatically called the money she'd taken. I signed without hesitation. We saw Marielle occasionally. She and Richard had bought a luxury condo in Cincinnati, and every other weekend she drove up to take the kids to dinner or a movie. These visits were strained at first, but gradually a new dynamic emerged. Not the family we had been, but something workable, civil. Nolan remained reserved around his mother, but Tessa, with her more forgiving nature, began to rebuild their relationship. After their fourth visit, Tessa revealed that Richard wasn't living at the condo anymore. "Mum said they're taking a break," she reported, making air quotes. She seemed sad. "Are you worried about her?" I asked, careful to keep my tone neutral. Tessa shrugged. "A little. But she made her choice, right?" The wisdom in her young voice startled me. "Yes, she did. But that doesn't mean you can't care about her. Do you still care about her, Dad?" I considered the question carefully. "I care about the mother of my children. The rest, I'm letting it go." And I was. The anger that had sustained me through those first terrible weeks had gradually dissipated, replaced by something quieter, not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. Marielle had made her choices. I was making mine. We were all moving forward. One Friday evening in December, I closed up at Gardner's and headed to Daryl's diner. I hadn't been back since that night with Harlan, but something drew me there. A need for closure, perhaps, or simply the comfort of familiar surroundings. The diner was decked out for Christmas, tinsel draped along the counter, a small tree twinkling in the corner. I took the same booth where I'd sat that night, where an old man had appeared and spoken 5 words that changed everything. Dottie spotted me from across the room and came over, coffee pot in hand. "Been a while," she said, filling my cup. "How are those kids of yours?" "Good, really good." I smiled up at her. "Nolan's applying for a summer coding program, and Tessa just won first place in the school art show. Heard you're working at Gardner's now. Suits you better than that factory, I bet." I nodded. "It does." She hesitated, then slid into the seat across from me, the same spot where Harlan had sat. "Ever figure out who your visitor was that night?" "No." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. "But it doesn't matter, does it? Whether he was really Harlan Bennett or someone else entirely, the message was what counted." "And what was that message, if you don't mind me asking?" "Don't abandon them like me," I quoted. 5 words that stopped me from giving up when I'd lost everything else. Dottie nodded thoughtfully. Funny how the right words at the right time can change a life. She glanced toward the door as the bell jingled, announcing new customers. "Duty calls. Good to see you doing better, Ethan." As she walked away, I noticed something on the table where her hand had rested, a small circular watermark, like the one Harlan's mug had left that night. I touched it, half expecting it to vanish, but it remained damp under my fingertips. I smiled to myself, paid for my coffee, and headed home. The house was alive with noise when I arrived. Music from Tessa's room, the clicking of Nolan's keyboard, the aroma of the lasagna I'd left in the oven before work. Home. Not perfect, not without its challenges, but ours. "Dad?" Tessa called from upstairs. "Can you come here a minute?" I found her in her room, surrounded by art supplies, working on a large canvas propped on an easel, a Christmas gift from Diane, who had gradually warmed to her role as supportive aunt rather than reluctant guardian. "What do you think?" Tessa gestured to the painting. "It's for the school auction next week." The canvas showed a diner at night, lights glowing against darkness, 2 figures visible through the window, a younger man with his head bowed and an older man reaching across the table, a gold ring gleaming on his hand. "Tessa, this is—" I trailed off, stunned by the accuracy of the scene. "How did you—" "You told us about him," she said simply. "The man in the diner who helped you when you were at your lowest. I imagined what it might have looked like." She bit her lip nervously. "Do you like it?" "It's perfect," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely perfect. Mrs. Levinson says I should title it for the auction. I was thinking 5 words. I think that's just right." Later that evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, reviewing our budget for the coming month. Things were still tight, but we were making it work. The new job, some additional repair work on weekends, and a modest child support arrangement from Marielle kept us afloat. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard about the painting from Diane. Tessa's got real talent. Please tell her I'm proud of her. And Nolan, too. M." I hesitated before responding. I will. They're doing well. Both of them. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Are you? A complicated question from a complicated past. I thought about it before typing, getting there. 1 day at a time. The response came quickly. Good. You deserve that, Ethan. Despite everything. I set the phone down without replying. There was nothing more to say. The past was the past, and whatever the future held, I would face it. Standing tall with my children beside me. Outside, snow began to fall, dusting our small patch of world with quiet possibility. I watched it for a long time, thinking about loss and gain, endings and beginnings, and the mysterious ways we sometimes find our way back to what matters most. In the silence of the kitchen, I could almost hear Harlan's voice again. Start by showing up. Everything else comes after that. I had shown up. I would keep showing up day after day, and somehow that seemed like enough. 1 year to the day after my world fell apart, I stood in the crowded gymnasium of Willow Creek High School, watching my daughter accept the Emerging Artist Award at the annual spring showcase. Tessa, now 15, had blossomed over the past year, her talent growing alongside her. Confidence. The piece that won, a series of 3 connected paintings showing a family's journey through crisis to renewal, had drawn attention from the local college's art department. Your daughter has exceptional emotional depth in her work, the art teacher told me as we watched Tessa pose for photos with her certificate. The way she captures resilience, it's quite remarkable for someone so young. She's had some practice with that, I replied, pride swelling in my chest. Nolan stood off to the side, tall and lanky at 17, recording the ceremony on his phone. He too had found his footing over the past year. The summer coding program had led to an internship at a tech startup in Columbus, and colleges were already expressing interest in the app he'd developed. A resource. Platform for teens dealing with family changes. We were healing. Not without scars, but healing nonetheless. Marielle attended the ceremony, sitting several rows behind us. She'd moved back to Willow Creek 2 months ago, renting a small apartment downtown. The Cincinnati dream had faded after Richard revealed his true colors, leaving her for his executive assistant, just as she had left me. Karma, some might call it, though I took no pleasure in her pain. After the ceremony, she approached us tentatively, elegant as always, in a blue dress that matched her eyes. Congratulations, Tessa. Your work is beautiful. Thanks, Mom. Tessa accepted her hug with genuine warmth. And Nolan, I hear the internship is going well? He nodded, his posture relaxing slightly. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Building. Something that might actually help people. I'm proud of you, both of you. Her gaze shifted to me. You've done a wonderful job with them, Ethan. They've done the hard work themselves, I said, but I appreciated the acknowledgement all the same. We chatted for a few more minutes before Tessa and Nolan drifted off to join their friends. Marielle lingered, her expression turning serious. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. A real one, not the half-hearted version I gave when I moved back. I shook my head. That's not necessary. It is. What I did, taking the money, the things I said to you, it was unforgivable. She looked down, twisting her now ringless fingers. I convinced myself you deserved it somehow, that I was entitled to more than what we had. Her voice caught. I was wrong. The sincerity in her voice surprised me. What changed? Watching you rebuild everything from nothing, seeing how the kids have thrived despite it all. She met my gaze. And experiencing firsthand what it feels like to be betrayed, I suppose. I could have said many things in that moment. That karma had indeed come full circle. That she had learned the hard way what truly mattered. That the money she'd taken had cost her far more than its dollar value. Instead, I simply said, we all make choices we regret, Marielle. The question is what we do afterward. She nodded, eyes glistening. I'm trying to make better ones now. She hesitated, then added, I've been saving to pay you back. It won't happen quickly, but eventually. Keep it, I said, surprising myself. Use it for the kids' college funds. That's what it was meant for anyway. Relief and gratitude washed over her face. Thank you, Ethan. We parted amicably. 2 people who had once shared everything and now shared only the raising of our children, a purpose significant enough to bridge even the deepest divides. Later that evening, as Nolan and Tessa recounted the ceremony's highlights over dinner, I was struck by how far we'd come from that devastating Thursday when everything had been taken from me. The house was still ours, more a home now than it had ever been. My job at Gardeners had evolved into a partnership, with plans to expand the business into custom restorations. The kids were thriving, their resilience a daily inspiration. And me, I was whole again. Different, certainly, stronger in the broken places, more aware of both my limitations and my capacity to overcome them. After dinner, I suggested a walk. The spring evening was perfect, warm with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers. We wandered without purpose until I realized my feet had led us to a familiar destination, Daryl's Diner, its neon sign glowing against the deepening twilight. "I haven't been here in ages," Tessa said. "Can we go in?" Inside, the diner was just as I remembered. Checkered floor, vinyl booths, the counter where Dottie still served coffee with brisk efficiency. She spotted us and waved us to a booth, the same one where I had sat that fateful night. "The Cole family," she greeted us warmly. "What brings you out tonight?" "Tessa won the art award," I told her proudly. "We're celebrating." "Well, congratulations, young lady. Desserts are on the house." As she walked away to fetch menus, I noticed an elderly gentleman sitting alone at the counter. Something about the set of his shoulders, the careful way he stirred his tea, sent a jolt of recognition through me. When he turned slightly, I caught a glimpse of his profile, sharp, dignified, somehow familiar. "Dad?" Nolan followed my gaze. "You know that guy?" I blinked and the resemblance faded. Just an old man having his evening tea, nothing more. "No," I said, turning back to my children. "Just thought I did for a moment." But as we ordered and chatted, I felt a presence nearby, a sense of being watched with benevolent interest. When I glanced at the counter again, the old man was gone, his cup still steaming on the countertop. Dottie appeared with our desserts. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Ethan." I smiled ruefully. "Maybe I have. The good kind, I hope." "The best kind," I agreed. After we finished our desserts, I excused myself to use the restroom. On my way back, I passed the counter where the old man had been sitting. Something glinted on the surface, catching the overhead light. Curious, I moved closer. There, beside the abandoned teacup, lay a heavy gold ring with an intricate crest, a shield with a tree, and 3 stars above it. My breath caught. I reached for it, but before my fingers could make contact, Dottie appeared and whisked away the cup and saucer. When she moved, the ring was gone, if it had ever been there at all. Back at our booth, Tessa was showing Nolan sketches for her. Next project. They looked up when I returned, their faces open and trusting, secure in the knowledge that whatever came next, we would face it together. "Ready to head home?" I asked, leaving money on the table for our bill. Outside, the spring night enveloped us, stars emerging in a clear sky. As we walked home, Tessa slipped her hand into mine like she used to do as a little girl. Nolan walked. Ahead, his posture relaxed, occasionally pointing out constellations he'd been studying. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the loss, the betrayal, the struggle to rebuild, and the mysterious old man whose 5 words had given me the courage to keep going when surrender seemed the only option. Don't abandon them like me. I hadn't, and I never would. As we turned onto our street, our house came into view, windows glowing with welcoming light. We'd left the porch light on, a habit I'd developed over the past year, a beacon calling us home, reminding us that no matter how dark the world might sometimes seem, there was always light waiting if you knew where to look. "Race you," Tessa suddenly called, breaking into a run toward the house. Nolan grinned and sprinted after her. I watched them for a moment. These children who had chosen to stay when they could have gone, who had stood beside me when standing alone would have been easier. Then I jogged after them, my heart full with the simple joy of having somewhere to belong, someone to love, something worth fighting for. Some might call what happened to me a tragedy, losing everything I'd worked for in a single day. But, standing on our porch watching my children laughing as they waited for me to catch up, I knew better. What I'd lost was nothing compared to what I'd found, the unshakable knowledge that true worth isn't measured by a bank balance or a job title, but by the courage to begin again, the strength to show up day after day, and the wisdom to recognize that sometimes the most important messages come from the most unlikely messengers. "Come on, Dad," Nolan called, holding the door open. "We're home." "Yes," I thought, following my children inside. "We are."